All right, I hit record. I am with Maggie Menane. Thank you for coming on and hanging out with me tonight. I really
No
appreciate it.
problem.
And you just published a book, Penny for Your Playlist, the a Gen X game girls novel.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Oh,
That's
thanks.
awesome. How does it feel to have your first book in the world?
Okay. I mean, it's like you're glad it's out there, and it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah, yeah. There's a weird lack of celebration, isn't there? You put it out and you're like, yay, I did it. And you look around and everybody else is like, so you're going to work tomorrow? You're like, I am. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Exactly. No, I'm glad it's out there, and I've gotten really lovely reviews, which I am so thankful for. But
that's so nice. That's great.
you know, I think findability is always difficult though, with like a one-off first novel.
Yeah, getting discovered is tough. It's especially in today's environment. It's crazy town. But you should still be exceptionally proud of what you've done putting a novel out in the world. I'm really excited for you.
Well, thank
Congratulations. Um, all right, let's talk about the piece you sent me. So you sent me the game night reviews with triple G's, which you want to use as a, I'm going to share the screen.
you.
As a oh crap, what do we call those things? A
Reader magnet.
yeah, reader magnet. There we go. Um so talk to me a little bit about this.
So, I'm not a fast writer. So my guess is the books aren't going to come out more than maybe one a year, or
Okay.
maybe a little faster as I get faster. But they're not going to come out every 6 to 8 weeks. So probably having a newsletter is important to keep people in the know that like I am writing another book.
Absolutely.
Um, the core of the books are these six women that meet every month or so to do board game nights, like
Okay.
in lieu of book clubs. And so that's sort of the one unifying factor. So like there's three different board game nights in the book that's published. Um, so they're part of the world that they're
Mm-hmm.
in. So I was trying to think of how to do a reader magnet and was thinking maybe something prequely. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Prequely. Um,
Yeah.
but mostly because I didn't want to spoil anything in the actual books.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Um, and so since the game nights are the one consistent thread, my thinking was like, what if when they very first started having their game nights like 4 or 5 years ago, they decided to have a blog where they like whoever hosted the game night blogged, about the game and gave a review and talked about the night or something, kind of for like the general public who might want to, start a
I,
game night.
yeah, I think it's fantastically creative. I love it. I mean, what I see you doing with this is like just publishing one every other week or every week as like a newsletter for,
Hmm.
you know, newsletter followers. That's what I so you're talking about a reader magnet. I saw it as like, oh, this is a brilliant newsletter idea.
Well, and I think
Especially are you
both.
are you a board game person?
Yeah.
Yeah. So especially if you're reviewing board games in the thing, it's a fantastic way to start pulling an audience into your readership. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
if they're playing a board game and somebody's commenting on it every um little episode thing that you put out, I mean, I'm not trying to sway you in either way, but I read it and I was like, oh, having your characters have a blog that they consistently write is freaking brilliant. Especially since that blog is on something that already has a fanatical fan base. Like people love board games. Like, and if
Right.
when people like board games, they love board games, right? Like it's not just a like, oh yeah, I play board games occasionally. Like adults who play board games love board games. So this is a very cool. Like I thought it was a brilliant idea.
Well, thank you.
I
Well, I
really
threw
love it.
board game nights for 3 years with my friends before COVID.
Yeah,
So I have real material, though these are fake characters, but
yeah,
I mean the games themselves I have real. I mean, I did want to make them actual game reviews, like not use fake games, but
No, I think it's great. I think, having, I don't know how often you'd want to run them out. You could run them out once a month. You could run them out once every other week. You would need them on a consistent schedule. You'd need to be like, okay, I put this out like the first Monday of every month. But writing a board game review in the voice of a character and giving us tons of, well, not tons, but giving us fun details about how the characters are interacting. I mean, that feels like a huge win. I just got to tell you. I read it. I was like, this is so smart. Yeah.
well, my thinking was this like 3 or 4 or whatever to get them started as the reader magnet and then do like once a month. That was sort of my
Yeah, you can almost do, there's a couple different ways to do a newsletter. One way to do a newsletter is like, okay, I'm posting. Are you okay that we're talking about this? If you
yeah,
don't want,
sure.
okay. One way to
That's
do a
where I'm
news,
at in my journey, the
okay.
newsletter.
One way to do a newsletter is like what I do, which I started my newsletter along like 7 years ago. And I send out every weekend. Well, 3 out of 4 weekends. I send out a like, here's an update on my life. Here's an update on my writing. Here's things that I've read. And so it has to be fresh, right? Like it's got to come out. It's got to match what's happening in the world that weekend. That's fun and fine. Um, Another way to do a newsletter that I actually wish I had done and I aspire to. I read it first in what's her name? Dana Kay, I think. She's a marketing guru who wrote a book for authors. That I'm totally also completely. I'm looking at my bookshelf like desperate.
Sunday night.
I can't find it. I know, right? So it's but she talks about having a newsletter that starts when a person signs up for your newsletter and then they just get them in order. So what's nice about that, and you set that up to auto send. So like I use MailChimp. MailChimp has a way to do like an auto responder, and you can just keep adding to the autoresponder. So people who sign up right away will be current with you, right? Like they'll get them the month you write them. But let's say like in 2 years, somebody signs up for your email list, they're going to start at the first one you wrote and then work their way through those as you wrote them all the way through. So, after like, if you're doing these once a month, after a year, somebody signs on, they're 12 newsletters behind you, which gives you a nice buffer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
If I were Maggie, if I had this idea and had written these books, that's what I would be doing. I'd be like, all right, I'm going to put 3 or 4 of these up as like my first 3 or 4 newsletters. And then I'm going to be like, hey, subscribe if you enjoyed this book, or if you enjoy board games, subscribe to this newsletter. My fictional characters are going to review board games, but the board games are real.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get a lot of people reviewing the board games. They're going to fall in love with the characters and fall in love with the story. And then they're going to go read the books. So I think I mean it when I say I think it's really, really smart. So I don't know how you're going to use it, but that's my pitch.
That's similar. I mean, I think I was thinking if these went out once a month, then I could always do a second, in the middle of the month, just more of a newsletter.
Always, but I don't think you'll need it. I mean, it depends how long you want to work on this series, and if you want another series in this. Like this newsletter would be specifically for this series because
Right.
It's your Game Girls,
Which could have up to 6 books, but I might die by then.
You have so many
I'm old.
characters. You have so many characters. You could literally read 100. You could literally write 100 books off of this.
Oh, okay. There's 6 in the game group.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Like you have 6 in the game
Yeah.
group, but they can each have multiple stories. Like you don't. I know you've got 6 in your head right now, but I promise when you get to book 3, you're like, oh, I can also write a book about this. Or you'll be like, oh, a new neighbor moves in, and I have a 7th person in the game group.
Well, and part of it is I'm breaking the mold a little bit because women's fiction does not tend to be series. So I'm sort of in this weird, like they're getting written.
Know that. That's interesting. I didn't know that women's fiction.
I mean, yeah, more romance is always series, but women's fiction often is not.
Huh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I know. Well, but like cozy mystery is, and like there's a lot of, I think, parallels to women's fiction that are series.
For sure.
Does that make sense?
And I mean, it's not never done.
Yeah.
But someone like, Colleen Hoover's all over. I mean, she's got 20 books, but they're all standalone
Yeah,
books, you know.
yeah, that's interesting. Um, well, anyway, that was my hope
Yeah,
for you. Um, okay, what do you want to focus on? What I left you a bunch of notes. We can always just
yeah,
work
yeah,
through
yeah. And
them.
I read them all.
But what do you want to focus on where you're kind of pressing desires for our conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is in general, I write third person. I just prefer third person. I mean, as my
Yeah.
own, but being these, I mean, would you consider these like monologue blogs first person? I mean, is that sort of what they are?
Yeah, they're first person POV.
Okay.
Yep.
They're just more monologue-y than
Well, first person in general tends to be more monologue
that's true.
because you've got there's one person telling the story. What's nice about first person is that it has a different feeling than third person monologue. Third person monologue is just like, okay, you're just telling me things. First person monologue, because it has perspective, feels like a conversation with the reader. So I think it's a good, I think you're doing a good job. You have three different pieces you sent me. The first one, I'm trying to remember their names. The first one's by
Yeah,
Penny.
first one's Penny because she's the one who wanted to do the blog and is kind of telling everyone, she likes to tell everyone, you know, how to do things.
Yeah, yeah,
So she's setting it up. Um, and then Gretchen's the second one. She's the one who, you know, puts up with it all and secretly enjoys it, but you know, is the, as you said, the take no shit, no frills lawyer. That's exactly her. Um,
nice. Well, you nailed her voice. You did a great
and
job.
then Willa's hard. She's you met her briefly when we did this last time.
Mhm.
She's my third book one. Her thing is she's pretty when she's in person, she's pretty short. Like she'll have one-line zingers, but she doesn't talk much. But she gets very much more sort of talkative and almost ADD when she's not with actual people. So like she dresses in cosplay and then she becomes very, you know,
Yeah.
friendly. Or here she's like talking to no one. So this like she's very open because she's, you know, she's really just talking to herself. But she would not talk like this like in person.
No, and that's good. So let's talk for a second about how to write first person voice. You and I have talked about voice modulation before,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So this idea that like you have different voices for different roles that you play in life. They all sound like you, but they're all different, right? Like so, for example, tonight I coached two basketball games, two basketball teams. I talk differently when I'm coaching junior high boys in basketball than when I'm talking to a mature and intelligent author like yourself, right? Like junior high boys in basketball, there's lots of yelling. I'm a little more insulting, but it's got some humor to it. I'm not afraid to call one of them dummy. It's just like because you have to, because they are. So that's a little, but I would never say that to an adult. That's a modulation of my voice, right? When I'm
right.
dealing with junior high boys in a sport, my voice modulates to be a little more irritated, a little more sarcastic, and a little more aggressive because they need it. So both me, two different voices. It's the same. You have to think of the inner voice as a modulation, right? Like the inner voice. So what you're saying about Willa is spot on, right? Like it sounds like she's quiet and a little shy in large groups, which lends to her having a very complex inner life, right? If she's not having a complex exterior life, she's having a complex inner life, which means her voice in the POV, in the narration, needs to be intelligent and complex and, not the shy, quiet. If she has a shy, quiet inner voice, we're never going to have a story because she's not going to say anything.
Well, I
So
mean, she's the rabbit hole person, right? The kind of nerdy, like looks at one fact, which is kind of where she goes on the deep dive on like the
yeah,
history of operation.
yeah,
Like,
it's great. It's great. It's really
like,
fun.
oh, I never actually explained the game, but
Yeah,
I
it's
know this.
very different than Penny and Gretchen. So it's good, right? Like you did a great job with the three voices and what you're feeling that like the voices do feel different. Penny feels different than Gretchen, feels different than Willa, and how you're using the idea that these are like a longer monologues is true. I do want you including more dialogue in them. And that was my biggest takeaway was like, you're doing these read like blogs. We don't read blogs anymore. Right? But they do read like blogs. They read like, what used to be blogging has kind of become YouTubing, where people just turn on the camera and talk. So they read like blogs, but you need them to read like first person mini novels that tell the scene. You need them to read like first person scenes. So, for example, let's look at the Penny one here and look at an overview. You've got this introductory paragraph for each one of them. Hi, I'm so and so. That's great. I want to come back to it, but it's really great. For each one, they start that way. They're like, hi, I'm, this person. Yeah, it's really good. It's nice that they introduce themselves to the reader right away. That's what I was going to say. Penny then introduces what this is, right? This is a blog about the game night. She then introduces the group, and you just list the names: Eva, Mira, April, Gretchen, and Willa. My daughter Olivia thinks our different styles of hosting are indicative of her vigilantes, personalities, but I'm not sure. Vigilantes. I'm sorry. Vigilantes. Oh, there's no R in there. I don't know. You got it. It's been a long week. Vigilantes. That actually makes more sense because I was sitting here trying to figure out how they connected to the poet Virgil, and I was like, they really don't. We should talk about that next. Yeah. So vigilantes. So you introduce the group. I want to come back to this as well, and then you get into the strategy, right? Like of how people set up their nights, right? Like introducing the reader, like, hey, here's kind of what you can expect in these blogs. That's why I'm saying if you ever run these out as a newsletter, make it an autoresponder, because this one always needs to be first,
right?
Because it introduces what happens. You talk about how they have themes and food, and then you talk about, I'm going to review this game, an 80s Trivial Pursuit. And you go into kind of vaguely what happened, but you don't really give me anything fun, as in like I don't actually get to feel the interaction of the characters. You just give me kind of an overview, and then you go into the second game, you talk about the board game, and then you give me kind of an overview of what happens, right? And they all kind of take that format. So having a format is amazing. Like, kudos for having a format. But when you get to this section where you're like, now it's fun stuff to review, this is where I want a scene in first person, right? And you have easy inroads to it. For example, April made fun of me because I wore Levi Keds and button downs, so a costume wasn't really a stretch, but I pulled out the now ozone safe Aquanet and went for the big hair, really what we were thinking. This is an end to a scene right here. Like, this is an on-ramp, right? April made fun of me because I wear Levi Keds. She said, blank quote. Then I said, quote, right? And I told her, you shouldn't throw stones anyway, because you still wear t-shirts from concerts that no one's attended, that you haven't attended since their 20s. She said, hey, those are great. And I said, if people remember who the Cheap Trick and the Knack are anymore, right? Like, so I want the back and forth between them. I want to hear these quotations in their voice. It's still first person. Penny's still telling me stuff. It sounds less like a blog, and that's a good thing because blogs are dead. So it sounds less like a blog and more like her telling me the story of the actual interaction of the night. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I think I was very much in the blog mindset, so that totally
Yeah.
makes sense.
And I think most of it does need to be a blog, right? Like when you're describing the game and how the game works, that needs to be a blog. When you're describing the theme of the night, that needs to be a blog. But you got to look for these on ramps that give me these little mini scenes. Anytime you're talking about an interaction between the characters, that's an on ramp for a mini scene that you can write that's really going to pull people in and drive them to your books.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's another one. You had originally written, my humble apologies. This is so long. My husband says I have verbosity issues. I'm sure my geeky girls will do better. Right. So I I want to feel that scene for a minute. I have my humble apologies. My husband says I have verbosity in these. Penny, he likes to say. Can you summarize this for me? Just the headlines. He's always saying just the headlines, right? Like, give me that moment between them where I get to hear his voice and then I get to hear what she thinks of his voice and how she responds to his voice. So I don't need a full like 1,500 word scene. I just need these mini scenes where you let me hear the voices of everybody, of the people that she's talking to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I can see you writing one of these because you talk about how it's the 6 women, but they all have the right to bring a +1. I can see each of these women ended up bringing +1s at one point or another that everybody else is frustrated with. I want to hear the conversation with that +1. Does that make sense? Like you
Mhm.
can literally track their lives through this board game, which is fun. And then again, what's brilliant about it, Maggie, is that people who enjoy board game reviews will also come to read this because they want to see the board games that you're reviewing. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. How do you feel about that overarching? Any questions or thoughts about that overarching um comment that you need these little mini scenes all throughout?
No, I mean, I do tend to write short. So, I mean, I don't know that they would be big, but I can totally see moving them into a more
Yeah,
conversational dialogue form.
I don't need them
Uh,
big. I just need little moments. Yeah, I just need little moments.
and
Little clips.
part of
Uh,
me, and this is, here I am thinking this is a private conversation. It's not. Hello, everybody out there. But
It's
I
just you
worry,
and me, Maggie. Just you and me.
I worry about setting myself up for something that I'm not going to be able to maintain.
Yeah,
So,
that's always a fear.
so mm, I'm number 2 strategic, right? So I could easily turn these into a, you know,
Hmm.
24 novel on its own, like,
Yeah,
but it could also take me like months to write each one if I
yeah,
start doing
yeah.
that. So
It's yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
sort of
It's a
what's
challenge.
optimal versus what will I actually get out the door
Yeah.
versus
Again, the nice thing about running them as a newsletter that runs monthly and that you just have is evergreen, where when people sign up for the newsletter, they enter in the first one. You can go ahead and knock 12 of them out, and you have a year. You never have to think about those 12 again because people are just going to enter your cycle and they'll start reading those 12. Um, that way, if you do come to a low point or one takes you 2 months, you've got a 12-month buffer in there, even for people who are, you know, uh, have already entered. That's the first thing. The second thing I would tell you, and I say this to you because I have to say it all the time to myself. I am number 1 strategic. I totally understand what you're saying. Um, is it better to try something and in the end not follow through with it than to never try it? I'm not going to let you answer. I will always say it's better to try it and fail than to never try. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, it makes sense. And I mean, I don't tend to worry about failing. I tend to worry about it becoming a beast.
Sure. How wonderful would it be if you got so many readers to this thing that when you miss one a month, they send you emails asking where it is? I
Well,
mean,
that would be
Maggie, that
lovely,
sounds
but
like the greatest problem a writer could ever have. Seriously, that's like the world's greatest writing problem is I didn't get things out fast enough and people were mad about it. I got to tell you, when I send out a newsletter, I think a lot of times my readers are like, whew, that's guy. I didn't have time to read that this week anyway. Right. Like, so I think, you know, I think what you're perceiving as a problem is actually probably a beautiful, beautiful result too.
Well, and I guess it's switching to a mindset of, I think I was originally just thinking of this as a very like, I don't know, concrete thing. And this sounds more like almost making it like a serialized fiction in a way.
Yes. But use it
Um,
as a newsletter instead of selling it. That's what I would do with it. And
um,
I'd keep them short. I'd keep them to 500-600 words.
okay.
Right. Like,
And
yeah.
that I think I could do. I think so. You were saying like you wouldn't package a few of them together at the beginning. You would just start with Penny and then like, so I would in a way almost have three halfway there.
Yeah, you got three halfway there.
Okay.
I'd write
Okay.
12. I'd get 12. I would spend December and January writing 12. And then I would sign people up for the news. I'd open up the newsletter for signature for signups in February. And
I mean,
I'd
it's
pump
already
it.
open, but no one's, has a reason to get on it.
Yeah. And I would actually pump it for the board game reviews.
Okay.
I would advertise it as a board game review. And I'd start putting it up on Instagram as like this week I reviewed this game, jump into the newsletter to find out.
Okay.
Does that make
No, that makes
sense?
sense. I mean, that's no, that's my, that would be my big picture. Wouldn't that be lovely?
Yeah. Wouldn't
What
that be
happened
amazing?
with
Yeah,
you?
wouldn't it would be the best problem ever if people were like, "Hey, you promised me a newsletter and I got nothing." Like, man, that's the greatest thing of all time. All right, let's take it more beat at a time instead of looking at overview, and let's
Yeah.
go a piece at a time. So you've got these openings. This is the first one, time after timeline. Hi there. Or sorry, you had Penny. You had sorry. Whew, words tonight. This is the first one. You had This is Penny, also known as Penelope, Olivia's mom, Ian's wife, Patricia's daughter, Simon's sister. Let's face it, I'll be answering to most anything. That's a great opening. Gretchen's opening. This is Gretchen. In case the giant G of medieval mockery, Penny insisted I put up here is not enough.
And
Love you.
that's because so there are graphics and things that go with it that,
Okay.
look like a blog.
Yeah.
Which I didn't send you just because the words weren't finished, so I
Yeah.
didn't
No,
want to,
I
but
don't need them. Yeah. No, I love that. So I love that. I love how different they are. I can hear the difference between Gretchen's voice and Penny's voice. That's excellent. And then the next one, Willa here, being the third installment, let's jump right in. My original plan was a chocolate candy theme. So this one reads very much like Gretchen, right? What I really want from these is I want to know the woman's personality right away. Right? This is Penny's is great that she's identifying herself with the relationship she has with other people is really fantastic. I really want you to push it even further, right? And I want you to like take it, you know, oh well, hello there. It's nice to meet you. I'm Penny, also known as Penelope or Olivia's mom or Ian's wife or Patricia's daughter or Simon's sister. I'll answer to almost anything. Or even coming back and giving her like even a bigger opening paragraph. Hi there, I'm Penny. I'm known as Penelope. Well, to my daughter's friends, I'm Olivia's mom. And to my husband's work friends, I'm Ian's wife. And if you went downtown and asked the women in the where my grandmother used to hang out, it was the pharmacy that served hamburgers. If you went downtown to the pharmacy that served hamburgers, they'd say I'm Patricia's daughter. And if you're a hot 30 something, I'm Simon's sister. Right? Like so, but just even giving us more here of her personality and a little more to get to know her, because while you're getting people to sign up for a creative blogger on board games, you're hooking them into your book by getting them to know these characters' personalities. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I guess that was sort of one of my questions too is, I mean, how much do you have them describe themselves versus having the other characters describe them or having it all in voice or I
The
mean,
first time, it's always all in voice. First person POV is always all in voice. The first time each of these characters is introduced, the description needs to be a little bit bigger. On your 7th one of these, when Penny's coming around for her second round, she'll be like, hey, it's Penny here again. You know, Penelope. I'm Olivia's mom. I'm the one that started the blog. Right? Like that's all you need for the next one. Does that make sense? But
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
first time around, you really need to hit the personalities hard. Yeah.
Okay.
I want you to hint at the beginning of each one, in the first 3 paragraphs, I need you to tell me something that's going to happen in the game night that's going to bring conflict.
Okay.
Right? So here, I would be like super excited to kick this off. Let's start with the basics. You can jump right in and read the monthly views and take away ideas. Maybe you can even start your own game night. And then I would actually hit it here in this next paragraph. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I do the one above. No, I do it in the next one, where she starts talking about strategy. It'd be in
Mm-hmm.
strategy, where she starts talking about the different things that everybody does. You need to get like the different themes everybody has. For this one, I would be like, well, like everybody brings their different theme, everybody does their own thing, and it makes it a lot of fun. Except when April makes fun of your t-shirt, but I'll more on that in a second. Right? Like, so let me know, like, okay, here's the conversation that's going to pop out in this one. Hint to the reader, like there is some conflict coming here that you're going to sink your teeth into in a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So they're almost like flash fiction in a
They are.
way.
They're mini scenes. You need to think of them as a mini scene, because
And
the
that'll
board
definitely
game.
be
Oh, what did you say?
go ahead.
No,
Oh, I
you
was
go
gonna
ahead.
say that's gonna be easier for some of them than others in the like so Eve would be the next one and she's a therapist and I haven't finished hers, but hers is essentially an analyzing different ways people are competitive. Like different
Have
ways
her
people
talk to the
communicate.
people about it. Have her say, and when I pointed this out to Gretchen, Gretchen said, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah, which I think shows that Gretchen has this issue. Now, when I
Right.
said to April this, April told me, blah, 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 blah. Right. Like, so have her talking to them about it and have them responding. And I would start that one with the conflict
Mm-hmm.
being, okay, this is like, hello, everyone. I'm Eve. I'm a therapist. And I just want to let you know, I've read the other blogs. This one's going to be a little bit different because I'm going to psychoanalyze my friends. Right. And now I'm in. I'm like, oh, yeah, let's psychoanalyze the friends. Let's do this. But we need that conflict up front. Right. For Gretchen's, I'm trying to remember Gretchen's.
Well, and Gretchen's a little hurt because she really does not want to do, like she's being forced into
Yeah.
doing this. So hers will be very short. But I
Perfect.
mean, I don't want to like people to feel like they didn't
No,
get one either.
it's great. So, but you're going to be like, this is Gretchen. In case you missed the giant G of medieval mockery, Penny insisted I put here is not enough. Love you, Penny. They asked me to host this game night. And then before you start going into like, here's my approach to this, I'd be like, and I told them right away, well, the theme is people coming to my house. And Penny told me, no, that's not what this is. You have to have a real theme, right? Then I told Penny, this is a real theme. People really do come to my house. And then Penny said, come on, Gretchen, like she always does. Right. Like, but I want that up front to set up the conflict of like, I'm breaking the rules of this thing already in week 2. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But it's that back and forth between Gretchen and Penny that we're going to show back up for.
Well, and I purposely picked Gretchen as number 2 because she is the polar opposite of
Oh, it's
Penny and
perfect.
everyone
It's a
else.
great decision.
Sort
Yeah.
of falls in the middle.
Mm-hmm. And it'll let readers know, like, hey, these are going to be different. Like each one of these is going to be different. I would so another thing I would do is you give us sometimes you introduce people. Penny's is the clearest because you introduce all the members here.
Hmm.
You got to give us stuff to stick to.
Okay.
We rotate hosting between the six of us who are permanent members: Eve, Mira, April, Gretchen, Willa, and me. My daughter Olivia, those five names are already gone. I don't even
Okay.
remember who they are. So you ever do Toastmasters or hear of Toastmasters?
I know what it is, but no, I have
Okay.
not done it.
Toastmasters is a weird, I don't know if it's cult like. I know the people I know that really
Oh, you
love
have
it.
to tag like the such and such, the so
Yeah,
and
treat
such.
it. Yeah. So one relevant detail, one interesting and relevant detail for each person that you introduce. As they start bringing plus ones that are fascinating to whoever's writing the blog, that also has to happen, right? Like, so I imagine down the road, you're going to be like, all right, this is Gretchen writing, and I don't know. We played checkers, I guess. I don't even remember. The board game wasn't very fun. What was fun was Eve's new boyfriend, right? Like, and then give me like I don't know, Eve may be married, but you know what I'm saying. Just pick a random and then give me like something interesting about him. Eve's new boyfriend, the stockbroker who thought it would be appropriate to come to my house in pajama pants. Right? Like now I know. So like here I want to be like the permanent members are Eve. She's really sweet. And Mira, she's our resident, or Eve is the therapist. Eve, she's the therapist. And Mira, she's the blah blah blah. And April, she's the blah blah blah. And Gretchen, you'll meet Gretchen on your own, right? Like even that line like tells me Penny's opinion of Gretchen. But that's what we want here is that like introduction to the characters that sets them in our minds and gets us excited about meeting them and watching them interact with each other. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Okay. Any thoughts or questions about that?
No, part again, my strategic brain's trying to figure out how much I need to actually plot out like timeline backstory. I mean, because
No, too
one of the things,
complicated. No.
well, but like one of, during the couple years before the first book, like one of the people's husband dies. I mean, it's all like mentioned. Um,
I mean,
but
if you want to make it that complicated, you can make it that complicated.
I always make things more complicated than they
I
need.
would I would just have it
I just don't want to be inconsistent
speaking
either.
from one strategic person to another.
And individualization. We're
And
the that level.
individualization. Yeah. What's your individualization? We're talking
One,
strengths finder people. Oh, see, I'm 1 and 2. So
right?
yeah, that's right. I forgot we flip. Your individualization strategic. I'm strategic individualization. Um, yeah, strengths finder people. Go look it up. Call Becca's up.
You're like
Um,
the very, very much more productive version of me.
so
So,
lean into your individualization. Each one of these needs to stand alone. They each need to be their own unique sunflower. Do not
right.
complicate it. And don't just say 2 years, right? Like, hey, this may go on for 15 years. Just let these roll as like something outside of the books that are happening. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I guess my worry is that someone will be like, well, that kind of happened then. Like in the book, it's
Yeah, don't let anything happen that's exciting. They're talking about board games. They're having a good
okay.
time hanging out. They're drinking wine, right? Like they can interact with each other. Like you were saying, like Eve decided one blog to psychoanalyze all of the members is fantastic. April and Penny arguing about whether or not Penny's costume is appropriate is great, right?
Okay.
Gretchen making snide comments about how she brought a fake board game and they still all loved it. It's fantastic, right? Like just
Okay.
keep it about the night and the friends interacting. Don't get too fancy with it,
Okay.
and it'll be great. And what makes them all different is that each week you're going to explain a different game.
Right.
So each
Okay. So
week you have the freedom to like do a different
keep
game.
anything real time out of it. Keep
Yeah,
anything
I wouldn't
that's
place it in
gonna
time.
date it.
Nope. Because you don't know, let's say in 15 years you have 30 books out,
That'd be lovely.
right? Trying to line these up with how people read those books is crazy town. Don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Okay.
Does it, this is kind of a side question. I probably know the answer, but should they each have their own who they think the audience is. Do I need to make that clear at all? Or is that just like for
Just
my
write in
own
their voice,
brain?
it'll be clear. If you write in their personality, it'll be
Okay.
clear.
Because,
Yeah.
they all think different people are reading it.
Yeah. And I'm sure Gretchen is like, and think about what their personality would do. Right. Like I'm sure Gretchen's looking at it being like, nobody's reading this. It doesn't actually matter what I say. Right. Like, so think about their personality and just write their personality. Yeah. This right here is another on-ramp.
Okay.
I like to make sure there are a variety of games because guests often have unique skill sets. Give me some examples, right? Like give me an on-ramp to know the group. Or here's another on-ramp. Pinterest is a gold mine for this theme. Some people dressed up as Madonna Ruffles in neon sweatshirts. Okay, you say some. Did more than one person come dressed as Madonna? That is a scene I want to see. Right?
Okay.
Eve and April both walked in together dressed with Madonna Ruffles and neon sweatshirts. I said to them, "Did you two? Are you the Doublemint twins? Because it's an '80s."
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but I said to them, "Are you the Doublemint twins?" And neither of them understood it, and that made me sad. And then April said, "I'm Madonna," and then Eve said, "I'm Madonna." Yeah, and you can go from there, right? Like let them chat about what made them pick Madonna and who's the best Madonna. And then make them turn to Gretchen and decide. And Gretchen can say, "I'm the best Madonna," and
One's
that's
like a Virgin Madonna, and one's,
yeah,
later
yeah,
Madonna.
yeah. Later, Madonna's dangerous. Yeah, but so that that
Okay,
that's an on ramp for a little scene, right?
that makes
And
sense.
again, I'm talking 50 words. I'm not talking
Okay.
anything big. Like 3 or 4 exchanges. Let them go back and forth a little bit, and then rein it in. Yeah, Knack or more says that they're different because they make experiences and are not trying to be fashion statements. Whatevs. It's a great line, but give me more here, right? Like, let me hear her voice. She said, "It's different. My shirt represents experiences." Okay, God, like, give me what she's gonna say. I don't know how her voice sounds. I'm just throwing that voice in there. But does that make sense?
Yeah, like I was wearing this shirt when Donnie Draper vomited on my shoes at prom or something.
Perfect. Yeah.
Like that.
She said, "This shirt is perfect. I was wearing it when Donnie Draper vomited on my shoes. You remember he was the super hot one." And then Gretchen can say, "What an honor. The super hot one vomited on your shoes." Right?
Right, got it.
Give us a little back and forth. Um, I don't know that I'd actually do this. I put this in here because I was kind of riffing, but like decide as a group how many cards to start with. For the first run, I suggest 3 to 5. Your cards are face up front to you. I don't know. I might keep the board just to keep it tight. I might keep the board game description itself just more bloggy, but you'll have to feel out the style. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other. Yeah, here's another place where I want her to comment more on Penny. Even though I've met Penny, we're in Gretchen's now. Um, Gen X girls asked me to go to the next alternative way, more like the antidote of throwing a game night so we don't scare you off. Timeline was okay last month, but heavy on the inventions and events of the patriarchy. So I'll play again when they had a feminist deck, right? But this was Penny's big pick and she loved it. So give me a comment on how Gretchen feels about Penny. It doesn't need to be mean, right? Inventions and events of the patriarchy, comma, which is very Penny, right? Like she'd have us all playing, Housewife of the Year. If we should have us all playing the game of life where the prize for the woman is to have the most babies, if I let her, right? Like, so just give us a comment here on how Gretchen feels about Penny to give us the interactions of the group. Because that's really what we're looking for. Here's another place I wanted more. For someone who has said she doesn't like martinis for the last 10 years, Eve certainly can drink a few. I told her, maybe you want to slow down on that. And she said, blah, 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 blah. That's all I need. I just want their exchange back and forth. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, And this is right here. I want to be living these moments with you. Even the guests who did not watch the video caught on quickly. So I won't bother telling you the mechanics. No, I want to know the mechanic. I want to know. Does that make sense? I want to know
Yeah.
how they interacted. I want to live in these moments. This is think of the blog as you are going to live in the game night with me. And by the end of the blog, I shouldn't just know how the game works. I should know what the game night was like and what everybody said and did. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, I think I just had kind of the same notes about Willa. I did love this moment. I was foolish enough to invent a chocolate lab. Was I foolish enough to invent a chocolate lab as part of the theme? Of course not. However, one game for the night was Operation, and every time somebody hit the side and it buzzed, Sherlock, the dog next door, started barking, thinking it was the doorbell. This is perfect, right? Like I'm in the moment. I can hear Sherlock barking. We have very thin walls in my apartment. After the 10th time, the neighbor knocked on my door and asked us to stop. Enter the pounds of Baskerville drama. Personally, the only reason I can fathom my neighbor named his less than genius dog Sherlock is so that he can stand in the park and yell, "Go shit, Sherlock!" Like that's perfect. And I feel like I was in this moment. The only thing that might make it better is if one of the women, had something humorous to say when the dogs came running in. Right, like that would be the only thing that would really make it pop. But this is what I want from all of the parties. I want to know what it was like and what it felt like to be there. Um, yeah. All right, those were all my notes. How do you feel about all
No,
that?
great. No, I appreciate it. I always appreciate your
Are you feeling excited to write more or overwhelmed?
probably both.
Okay, great.
But that's kind of a
I'll
normal
take
state
it.
for me.
I'll take it from a strategic thinker. I'll take it.
Different parts of me are some are excited, some are
Yeah, some
overwhelmed.
parts of me are excited. The individualization is like, oh my gosh, I can do so many individual of these. The strategic side of me is like, oh my gosh, I have to plan so many of these. Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah. All right. Anything else you want? Did we talk about all your questions around first person POV?
Yeah, no, very much so. Yeah, to me, first person just seems so much harder than third person.
I think it's going to be easier for you than you think because you know your character voices so well.
Mm. Well,
The
part of it is
hard,
I don't always love reading first person. Like it has to be done really well for me as a reader to like it. And no, nothing against people who write first person. That's just how my brain works.
what would you say makes good first person?
That I forget it's first person.
Okay. What causes that to happen?
Um, when it feels like I'm just like writing sidecar with them as opposed to
Yeah, that's fair.
uh,
Yeah.
feeling like I'm kind of being
Yeah.
told.
Living that moment. Like you're just listening to somebody tell you what happened in their day. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think a part of that is that you keep it in the moment, keep it in the scene, help us live the moment. I think the other part of that is that the character voice needs to be super clear. And that's like, and you can't lose all, I think a lot of, you know, poorly done POV, first person POV, the character voice, the narrator's voice doesn't have any personality to it. It's just like, oh, this is the narrator saying I and me instead of, but when you can translate the voice of the character into a narrator voice, you get a really compelling story because all of a sudden we're like wrapped into a conversation with a real person as opposed to having to turn off the character voice when we listen to the narrator and then turn it back on when we hear the character speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean,
Yeah.
I think for me, sometimes first POV, the characters are a little too self-aware too, as far as
Yeah. Yeah. And
where, I mean, that's one of the things I sort of like about not being first person is like you've got what they're saying, but then you've got people's reaction that you can tell it's not like
yeah,
necessarily real.
totally. Yeah.
That's harder to do in first person, I think.
It is. I mean, first person narrator, unless it's the first person narrator in the future telling a story that happened in the past, I've read some really good books like that where they're like, I'm going to take you. The first chapter is usually something like, I'm going to take you on a journey of what happened to me 20 years ago to explain to you what happened to me now. But when you're doing first person present, like you are, first person recent past, where you're like, last night we had a game night, right? Like you're not going to know that, like, and in 20 years, Gretchen's going to have two daughters. She doesn't know it yet, right? Like, so you can't get into that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. So there is this like limited perspective from first person. I also think it's hard because like something that I see first person writers breaking a lot is like, the first person narrator will somehow magically know what happened in Gretchen's house when they weren't there,
Mhm.
right? Like you're limited to where you are. Part of what I love about the way you're doing this, though, is that the entire, you know, flash fiction scene is happening at a game night where they're all attending. So that, the first person narrator will know what's going on because you've limited the scope of the scene, right? Like that kind of scope creep becomes a problem when you're running all over the world. And all of a
That
sudden, the
makes
first
sense.
person narrator knows that, like, Billy the Goblin was climbing a mountain, even though nobody's told the first person narrator that. Yeah. So I think you'll be safe. I'm not worried about you doing that.
Okay. Well, it will be eminently better just because you had a hand in it.
Oh, thank, that's very sweet of you.
So,
All right. I'm going to stop the recording. We can chat a
yep.
little bit more.